I should lie. What's up? Test. If this is working, let me. I should actually check. Yeah, yeah. What's up? What's up? Test. Like, what the fuck? Why is it so? Yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, shut up, shut up, shut up, boy. Uh, it was me who had myself way too loud. I, yeah, brother. Anyways, the point is here we are. Not yet really, but here we are. I guess that's the fun of this. Ah, uh, so there we are. Let me see. What am I forgetting? That's the question of today. What am I forgetting that I should have done? I don't know. Uh, uh, no idea. Anyways, let me. Ah, yeah, I know. Now I finally know. I should like activate the audio in this other area so that I have no problems later on. There it is. There it is. Okay. You mean how much time left? 3 minutes. Okay. 3 minutes for me to leave for a second, do something. That thing that we would otherwise call an idle break. That happens right now. And after that, yeah, we are starting, I guess. I don't know. Let me let me see. Sorry. What's up? Anything to actually say? I guess not. Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry, sorry. I was thinking about it. I think it would be very funny to have something like a very good microphone. I don't even know exactly what is it that you need. How do people do it even? That thing where they have good enough microphones, so that they can capture even their bones cracking, that sort of stuff is, I think, interesting. I think so. Anyways, uh, that was, I guess, more of a desire attraction. I don't really know how to classify it, but yeah, something along those lines. It's nice to hear, It's something interesting to hear. Unavoidably, as always, depending on the context, but I guess something like, oh yeah, here we are waiting for everything to happen. like getting set up and whatnot, and yeah, we can actually like use those 5 minutes to do something like let's fucking crack everything, you know. That would be well. But anyways, wow, 5 seconds late. I cannot believe it. Anyways, good evening. Good evening. No, really not that much to add today. I think not that much to particularly say. I guess it has been, yeah. Let me say it like this. It has been not so long since the last time that we actually were here. It was literally yesterday that we were here. Also, am I doing something with the mic? No, no, no. I am not supposedly. Why is it so weird? I, I'm going crazy. I see the microphone and it isn't acting like normal. Anyways, I guess the point itself is I was thinking about it, and I just think that it's it's nice that we are back here. It hasn't been really that long and such. So I was saying we have only been away for like less than a day in itself. Also taking into consideration that as always, I'm not somebody who is incredibly on time most of the time itself. So yeah, the point is here we are. So that's good enough, I think. I I find it to be sufficient. I believe so. That's to some degree good enough. But also, yeah, not much to really say. I kind of struggle quite a lot with that actually personally, to have anything outside of the normal to say in those days in which I occupy myself with the learning about the stuff. I haven't yet fully mastered, let's say, the skill of just easily forgetting and wiping away everything that I had been consuming for, let's say, long enough periods of time so that I believe I am informing myself in any way to later on be capable of utilizing that mental capacity in any other ways, in any other area of life, you know? So it's, I guess, yeah, the, the answer is today what has happened so far studying, I guess, not much more. I don't know. I haven't really thought about talking about that, but I have also been trying to slowly balance more, properly studying even more. It's kind of complicated, not because studying itself is hard, but rather because you know sometimes you forget that you can actually do stuff well enough, and once you find yourself trying, you find out that you actually can do quite a lot more than what you thought you were capable of in your own mental perception of the thing itself that you're trying to do. And not only that, but also something very funny that happens, let's say, in tandem with that is the reality of, and wow, also, we, or I personally, can realize that I can even go much further in this case, I'm talking about studying, in the action itself of studying than what I thought I was capable of. And at the same time, it's also about sort of not being capable of understanding where the limits are and forgetting that, yeah, at some point, you should actually consciously stop, consciously say, okay, this has been a good enough period of studying. I should actually, I don't know, take a chill pill and a break, and it's, I don't know. It's anyway. It's something funny, but the point is, we are not here for that. Sorry. Ah, I have still, yeah, to actually decide what is the third thing that we're going to go for today, particularly. I don't have an actual idea so far. As I said, I have the excuse that I have been studying. I have been trying my best to do that lately, and yeah, it's as always something fun to do, but doing so occupies more time than what I have for other things. Not that it truly consumes everything else, but I guess I allow it to take a bigger piece of the or portion of the picture than what I do other stuff. So yeah. Anyways, the point is today the already defined things, as always, the basic mode of a structure of these discussions, I guess, is me just going off on two different things, which at the same time can be multiple, but in themselves are two things to look at. Is we can just look at the title itself of the stream, the thing that is below what says. Also, yeah, I kinda forget about that. Also, what would be the title of the video itself? That's where we can find what or one of the guidances nowadays compared to before where it wasn't even related that much. Yeah, today I try to include some of those ideas into the title, and that's we only have two: willful style and distance. And on the second one that we can supposedly look at, I guess it's the one that is supposedly, as always, me being the guy at the tiny potato guy. Above my head, there is some text that says today, colon, and it says to be defined. So yeah, I have absolutely no idea yet. But anyways, we already have at least two other things to go off. So I guess we can at the very least start with that. I don't know. I yeah, I don't really have anything to actually say in any other area. I think, as always, there are many things happening, but none of them require that much attention or, yeah, have that much of an importance. No, nothing that actually matters can interrupt what we are saying right now. So let's just start, I guess. As I was saying, or to begin with the idea, first concept. What is willful struggle? I think I have already, to, in some form, I I always tend to talk about a bunch of things throughout time in repetition for the sake of trying more than anything else to get the idea itself across. I think it's one of the few certainties of life is that, yeah, sadly, we do need to actually engage way too many times with the messages of any kind, not particularly educative of this sort, so to speak, with any kind of idea. We have to deal with a lot, and in some cases, we can actually do that by ourselves, as in through just my methods of thinking about it and the constant struggle in trying to reconcile this idea with what I see in the rest of the world. All of that works for me to keep revisiting something so that I finally understand it. And when I don't actually have that, when it needs to come from the side, sadly, yeah, it's more than anything else from the side of repetition. And yes, just this place is most certainly the best, or yeah, the best that we can actually have so far to repeat stuff long enough and such. And yeah, uh, it is, as I was saying, or the reason as to why I was saying that, it's in some way we have sort of talked about this already in a different flavor, not so directly centered. I guess also I have been trying to continue the development of the idea itself to not have something so basic or so crude that it's, let's say, mentioned because it exists in other things. It's more along the lines of, okay, maybe now it exists by itself. Maybe now we have something that we can observe in the void of the idea. and not worry about the other sides of what we are talking about, let's say. So that's, I guess, as always, preamble for the idea. The excuse, the presentation is that if we are accustomed to hearing these sort of things, yeah, it's pretty much an already present and an already discovered idea in what I have previously mentioned in many other occasions. But in this case, directly analyzing it, directly trying to discuss it, this concept of, yeah, willful style, I I think it's something quite funny. Let's say like this: there is this notion of style. Style represents any instance in which we deal with the stuff that might be somewhat bad, somewhat not as enjoyable as everything else. And as far as what I can personally identify, it seems to be the norm that, yeah, we also talk about the struggles and whatnot in a very negative light. It's not the norm for us to say that struggles are something to strive to have in life. I remember, for example, having this or a similar discussion of sorts about how we need to be capable of suffering a little bit more, having those instances in which things are not so good in life, and this whole idea or notion of, and you know what, in reality, in the world in which we live, the message itself is quite the opposite one. We never should aspire to have bad times. If everything, or if anything, we should try to make sure that we are, as much as we physically can, experiencing happiness in our life, having those great moments of enjoyment as much as we can throughout our whole existence. And that's the mode in which we can find ourselves living most of the time. It's not something that never happens. Once again, it's quite a recurrent theme throughout our life that, yeah, we, I guess, let's say like this, at least in the present world, we are quite accustomed to this necessity or this adoration for only comfort and stability and whatnot. And yeah, as always, I do believe it's quite wonderful to have these instances of, you know what, today it's not going to be such an interesting day, or it's not going to be such a utterly nice in the most direct manner type of nice day. It's just going to be a day in which I willfully face things that take some time. It's always something hard to talk about. It's this difficult discussion to also have because it's easy to say, okay, we need to have more confrontations with things. Things of which sort? Do I need to confront other people? Do I need to confront myself? Do I need to confront the society itself? What is it that I need to confront, to debate, to fight against even? I think it's more than anything else. I guess the process of slowly starting to realize, to understand, to adapt ourselves to the act of observing, accepting, and denoting where is it that we are trying to aim ourselves at, and the capacity to also, yeah, in some manner, be capable of more and more dealing with all of those displeasant parts of life. I think it's quite surprising to see that, yeah, actually, that's it's implicit on the name itself of the category. The willful action, even if it is done towards something that we might not enjoy as much, let's say, I don't know, uh, I guess cleaning is one of the most common examples. Even if cleaning is something that I don't personally find as entertaining as useful or as pleasing to do, unavoidably there are certain rewards that I can get and that I can ensure to have and whatnot once I allow myself to do them properly enough. The issue is I have to actually utilize my time on, at the very least, thinking about doing it. It's quite easy to categorize something and say, okay, yeah, I don't know, I think I won't have such a nice time doing something, therefore it is not a nice thing to do. And after that, I guess the only basic idea that I can have is, oh wow, yeah, I already know this thing is displeasing. Why should I ever question myself about that? I don't know. I think in many instances, it's something quite funny along those same lines. What happens with everyone, I guess, we are quite capable of assuming, of making certain reasons somewhat apparent about why we are or not doing things. And in many cases, it's these unanalyzed, unobserved modes of reacting to stuff that are actually behind the stuff that we do, the habits that we have already formed. And yeah, I think it's also part of that. Embedded in all of that is the necessity of everyone to be capable of slowly constructing themselves, let's say, a little bit more towards the recognition and the proper confrontation, or at least realization of which things is it that I have that I can say are bad, that I might not need to keep on fully avoiding, because they are not all that useful to just avoid. I can actually instead utilize my time on other stuff that I might find a little bit more entertaining, and I can find it a little bit more useful. Maybe I can, even if the thing itself is quite annoying for me to do, or that's the funny thing. Yeah, we're not, the category of an struggle doesn't truly just encompass anything that might be minimally displeasing. I guess in the bigger scheme of life, yeah, unavoidably other sorts of struggles are going to be those in which we have to go through those hard times because we are facing stuff that was in some way intense enough for us to have a bad memory about it, that might have even changed the way in which we react to the rest of the world. It's sort of this, I guess, yeah, suddenly in the act of avoiding the direct mention of it, excuse me for that, just to make it clear. Yeah, I guess I'm trying to also talk about this stuff around the realm of anything that might qualify as traumatic, most probably. Those intense enough moments of negative emotions, high stress, and whatnot. Those things are also struggles. But I think it's also, to some degree, yeah, I haven't fully found a way in which it is easily enough mentionable or coherent enough so that we can actually be capable of talking about it in a way in which we all feel like we are getting somewhere. Let's say it's a complicated discussion to propose to somebody who has lived their whole life in terror because they had one bad enough experience about something that now, when anything minimally similar appears, they are instantly called back to that bad moment. But part of the willful struggle, part of the necessary, in this case, yeah, confrontation with the thing itself is to also have the capacity to once again slowly deal with all of that. I think it's quite fantastic to be capable of trying slowly throughout time and getting, even if they seem to be minimal, enough results so that when one day things get resolved. I think something I have very recently heard about this, and I am just now trying to integrate all of that. Supposedly, we are not as capable of realizing, at least consciously, or by the mere act of repetition, without trying to really observe anything about it, when things slowly change, we are not capable of realizing stuff of that sort. When things slowly get better, progressively enough, let's say like maybe even 1% is big enough. Maybe if just 0.01% of our life changes every single day, we are not capable of actually gaining awareness of it or measuring how much of an impact that has, because what it means is not that we actually had a change in any way, but rather that what we did in comparison or in the sum of all of those efforts, what slowly over time changed, that did become a completely different normality for us, could take so long that we actually can completely ignore the reality of that. And I think, yeah, sadly, the aspect of any willful struggle, there is quite a lot of that. Sadly, we are quite incapable of, as always, realizing that we finally have solved something. It can take so much time. Any willful struggle, even more of those against those events that might be otherwise called of the utmost impact on the person, might take so much time processing and whatnot that from a personal from an analyzed perspective, it might feel like nothing truly changed. But it is, yeah, I guess it's sort of a different realm. The capacity to actually be capable of cementing enough things around ourselves so that we can finally then trace back to the things which we want to change, the things which we are working on, the struggles that we are actually permitting in our lives, and the things that we are actually doing, even if we know that they are not all that useful, or even if we know that they are not all that enjoyable, all of those things that we do have around us, and all of those things that we do include around our existence, all of that is in some way, funnily enough, yeah, something useful and something wonderful to have, but at the same time, it's complicated to properly realize the impact that any of those things also create in our own life. It's, I guess, in a tandem with that, it should come with a most certainly a useful, or at the very least, even if not exactly useful, at the very, very least, uh, certain enough so that we can trust on it. Uh, I guess empirical, that would be a good category, probably an empirical enough method of measuring how we are slowly progressing towards things. I guess, and yeah, certainly, it is still, um, I guess, let me make this concession in this way. I am talking about stuff that has to deal mostly, once again, in the realm of any kind of event that is associated with intense enough emotions from our personal perspective. We still don't fully possess measurements that are objective. We always are talking about things as if they had the capacity to be objective, while in reality, what happens is we all have to trust ourselves, each other. You tell me that you feel bad. I have to trust your judgment on your sensations and assume that you are feeling bad, and we have to, the both of us, do this mental play in which You slowly get better, and you slowly tell me that you get better. Can we have any proper measurement for that? I would assume, let me say it like this, it is still possible to have enough real objective methods of clarifying to ourselves, demonstrating to ourselves that we are doing better. But in some other aspects, sadly, it also is sort of impossible to realize. To keep on connecting the dots, let's say. I don't know. I, something very funny that I have struggled quite a lot with was having to accept that, for example, I used to be somebody who was full of allergies when I was younger. And I never stopped to actually think about it. Most certainly because it seemed to be part of my whole existence. So it was something that I assumed was just a part of me. Therefore, it took me quite a fucking long time to finally come an in agreement with the idea and integrate onto myself that yeah, maybe I am not somebody who is utterly allergic to everything. I am not somebody so ruled by a physical thing. Maybe this sensation that I am having, it is something that I can see. It is something that everyone else can see. It is true. But at the same time, what also happens is this isn't being just because of a already determined, unchangeable aspect of myself. It is in accordance with another side of myself. It is in accordance with something else. And maybe, once again, continuous, intense enough struggles allow to change. It might have taken me, I don't know, maybe 10, I guess, I don't know, not 10, but at least 5 or so years to finally be capable of separating from that other different way of being, of assuming that, oh yeah, I am going to be an eternal allergic. I am going to always have those weird things on me. And I think it's, once again, it's possible to have the same thing happen on most cases. The issue is, it's also supposedly something that requires quite a lot of different inclusions. We, if we try to become aware of which things could allow ourselves to have a better life, it might require actually quite a lot of efforts to even be capable of fully realizing why is it that some things represent such an struggle for us. I don't know. I, for example, I can, if I have to just sit down and do it, I might probably study what I was talking today earlier. I can study for 5, 6, 10 hours a day. I don't have a problem with that. But I know that other people have impediments in doing so. Can we actually talk about that? Can we actually be capable of recognizing why things of this sort appear, exist in our lives? Are issues that we possess? Why is it that some certain ideas even are so complicated to make sense of, to be capable of integrating into our modes of thinking? I cannot fully stop myself to do that and to have a completely certain response. But at the very least, yeah, I know that there are some things of that sort, and that in each case, the most correct answer is if the person can slowly enough arrive to the realizations, it also stops being just a meaningless struggle. A part of the reason as to why it has to be willful is because it needs to have a proper reason behind why you're doing it. It's not about, yeah, we need to willfully struggle. Therefore, every single day I am going to peel my skin off from a new part of my body. And that's throughout the whole year, so that I never visit a part that I have just recently visited. I am throughout the whole year going through different parts of myself, just exercising suffering onto myself for the sake of struggling a little bit. You know what? I need to do some bloodletting, therefore I will do it. No, 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 no. It's not about acting stupid with what we are saying. It is possible to do so, yeah, but it shouldn't need to be stated. No, no, it has to be something that possesses a goal of any sort. Actions without any proper intention are quite meaningless, even if in itself the action is just done for the sake of enjoying the action performed. That is 1,000 times better than to do something for the sake of just doing anything, you know? It's not about, oh yeah, we have to struggle, we have to be capable of struggling in the world because, let's say, this different mode of association that we can identify in the modern world. Struggling is a normal thing and it's something normalized and it's something that we talk about as necessary. If somebody is successful, they probably struggle quite a lot. Therefore, what we are saying here is, oh yeah, you know what? Bro, you have to struggle so hard, so that way one day you will be just as successful as the other people. No, it's different channel, different encoding channel. By allowing ourselves to deal with things that we realize are problematic for ourselves, and even more slowly confronting more more than anything else those things which we know are troublesome for our own existence, we can slowly get into even better stages of our own development. It might be slow and progressive enough so that we might not be capable of realizing what is changing, how we are being modified, but unavoidably things slowly change once we utilize our efforts on whatever is it that we have an interest on. And to create an interest, unavoidably we have to first off define what is it that we want, what is it that we don't have such a nice time dealing with, and whatnot. But in the end, the most wonderful thing is not that, oh, well, yeah, you know, I suffered for 5 hours straight and I gained nothing. No, 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 no. It's okay. I am slowly getting better at this thing. I'm slowly doing better in different areas of my own existence, of my own life, of my daily life. I'm slowly having less issues that trouble me, and I am actually just encountering things that I can confront with more capacity. I guess you want a more nuanced development as to why this is such a common thing. Unavoidably, on the other end, this eternal the discovery of the individual in the modern world. What happens? What can we identify out there on the other end? Somebody who hasn't fucking dealt with anything? What's the goal? To avoid everything that might seem to represent any kind of a struggle for our life? I don't know, man. I don't want to actually desire to kill myself every single day. I understand the people that do so, but I would very much prefer to have to consciously go against some things that might seem somewhat complicated to deal with, some not so easy conversations to have, some not so nice things to do, or not so full of enjoyment in itself actions to partake in, or processes in which I don't find myself, even if the outcome is positive, I don't find myself having a good time. I prefer that rather than to stand on that other side. What is it to be a person who finds themselves suffering so much just for the sake of suffering, just for the sake of having avoided any other situation of any other sort? I don't know. I think, let me say it like this. I have been thinking quite a lot about philosophy lately. I think one of the few realities is, yeah, philosophy can at the very least still talk about the soul. You know, in some degree of philosophy, the soul still remains as a proper concept. Sadly, Psychology hasn't properly claimed the torch and has carried the responsibility to talk out this thing which we call nowadays the soul. Okay, therefore, where can we identify that? In this other area. And this other area allows for a much more useful mode of discussing the same issues still. What is it? Any person that might want to have a good enough soul has to willfully enough find and struggle against difficult situations. Those who do not do so will only slowly weaken their own soul, and the moment in which situations of enough complexity appear, any soul unavoidably crumbles, but the threshold for what a surpassing situation means or what an overwhelming situation is dwindles the more we allow ourselves to not face any kind of complexity in life. And that's not something that psychology itself can say so easily, but at the same time, yeah, at the very least, if nothing else, philosophy allows for a little bit more of that, you know? And once again, I don't even think it's something along the lines of, oh yeah, yeah, this is self help. I don't know, man. It's just the reality of stuff. The promise is we can try to do better. We can probably get better results if we do this thing. It might not be as enjoyable. The the outcome is going to be this other thing, and the the only thing that remains is, can I actually try to do so? Can I actually find myself doing so? Can I actually realize if I have had at any other time in my own life even instances of this same phenomena already happening without me having ever realized that I have actually engaged on this sort of behavior? For example, just as a parallel example of things that happen without us realizing. Something that always happens is the infant utilizes a lot the scientific method. I test for myself. I keep trying and trying until I finally understand why things are the way in which they are. I do. Then I draw the conclusions of things. That is the most basic method of the scientific method itself. In this same case, how much we are willfully struggling against stuff and we never have the capacity to realize that it is indeed another form of a struggle. How much can I actually read many books without ever saying, oh yeah, this is in itself a sort of a struggle? I fucking love it, but unavoidably it is a struggle. I play games that I don't understand until I become good enough at them that I can call myself a good enough player. I hear enough music until I understand an artist, I understand why they are good. I watch enough movies so that I can form a criteria of my own and I can properly give out critique of any sort. There are many instances of that same thing happening. There are many moments in which we willfully struggle against things towards different goals. The issue is how we try to frame it means more than 90% of the action itself in some way, or in this case, of the realization that comes with the rest of the action, if nothing else, you know? And I think sadly, yeah, it's possible for us to have many of those things, but at the same time, I don't know, man. It's not something that needs to be so bad. Sadly, I kind of blew or passed over it very rapidly. Yeah, there is, as always, many of the symbols that are utilized by the culture are quite different once you slowly observe what they objectively mean. A struggle doesn't need to be something that is literally life or death situation. A struggle has to be a little baby opening a bottle. That's a struggle. Is the baby going to die if they don't open the bottle? Most certainly not. They just needed to fight a little bit more. They needed to once again, struggle a little bit more until they get the result that they want. That can be a sufficient enough example of a struggle. So somehow we love so much to make such a dramatic portrayal out of the things which we see that out of nowhere, and struggle is only if we are facing our utmost demons. That can be a struggle, but that doesn't need to be the only type of struggle that anybody is capable of going through. So some days there was this good expression. Some days all I can do is actually just minimally get things in order to continue with the rest of my life. That is an struggle in and of itself, and that is enough for me, and that is enough to satisfy my necessity for any kind of a struggle also. And sometimes it's hard to be capable of realizing that that also is any kind of struggle, not just what allows me to struggle in a meaningful way, in a willful manner, but also what gives me a reward of any sort, what is, once again, in itself, a thing that I deal with not so easily. And I don't know, it's complicated, I guess. It's the the easy response as always is it might be somewhat complicated. It isn't really all that complicated. It's just keep on trying, man. Keep on trying. Things slowly get better, and that's I guess the promise. The same as as always, things slowly get better. Just keep on trying. You don't get it right now. Keep on trying. You can't do it so well right now. Keep on trying. It's good. It's wonderful as long as we don't actually surrender against the hardships of life. They are just continuous struggles towards the things that we might want to accomplish. And that in itself is far more meaningful, useful, and beautiful than to just surrender in the face of any adversity. I think if something is in any way real or true enough, sorry, it is that the life is full of adversities of different sorts, unavoidably also of different quantities or varieties or intensities, and unavoidably, it also is about being capable of being ready for as many of those as we can, not in terms of having already prepared ourselves for them, but rather possessing a good enough constitution so that no matter what comes, it doesn't destroy the human being that supposedly we care so much for. This whole idea of, yeah, love yourself as you love others and whatnot. I can say that I love myself. I don't have even the capacity to be ready for some problems that might unavoidably come, some things that I will unavoidably have to struggle dealing with. How much do I actually care for myself then? If I know that some things are essential confrontations for me to have if I want to keep on moving towards any kind of goal. I don't know, man. It's also a little bit of that, I guess. But I guess that's a different branch. But yeah, that's the idea. I guess a little bit more developed. Let me drink some water. Let me try to see if I am forgetting something. I, as in, I'm pretty sure I'm forgetting something. I don't exactly know what. Yeah, I remember also. I think I tried to talk about some things throughout every single year. It has been almost 2 or 3 years of us being here. Unavoidably, this has been repeated enough times. I also try to say it in different ways, even if it is the same essential message, in different manners, so that it slowly gets somewhat more complete also. More so if we were to compare what all the messages are throughout time. of the similar thing. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's sometimes way too much of a complication of things. Sometimes it's not so hard to get. Yeah, just have some more unpleasantries. Actual unpleasant things, not just avoiding bad stuff. That in itself is already tiresome. Actually, have it be bad. That's good enough. That's much better than to spend so much energy not even trying to acknowledge its existence, you know? But yeah, I guess at that point, yes, that's a far better analysis or explanation of anything. But as I said, that's it. That's it for the first one. I haven't, yeah, I guess trying to think out something else to add on that on the other title, on the today colon. I have still no idea. Anyways, but moving on, next idea. We are on second topic. Um, Distance. Yeah, this is a little more complicated. I don't know. Um, let me start. Okay, let me say it like this. I think this is most certainly a personal thesis. I try to unavoidably, in some way, most of what anybody talks about is just things that they have experienced, let's say, and in some way there is this innate when you read about the people who have read about philosophy, what we find out is this recurring description of, oh wow, the philosophers are only rationalizing their behaviors in different ways. I try to say that just to probably warn that maybe it isn't really all that much of a good thing to have in itself. I don't know. I don't think in it's better to have the opposite. I do say it and I do talk about this because I believe it is better than the alternatives in some degree. And yeah, continuing or starting with the idea itself before I guess warning minutes. Okay, distance. What the fuck is distance? Um, I think it's quite useful. So possess a little bit of distance from stuff. I always I remember having heard from many different areas how useful it is to not be so attached to stuff. I wouldn't exactly call it non-attachment. I wouldn't be so bent on the perspective of, oh yeah, we are souls who are attached to this world. You have to become detached. You have to distance yourself from all your needs. Not exactly on that. I think sadly, something that this current world does is slowly, despite all the other advances that we do have, despite all the other knowledge that we have already garnered in the different sciences of the world and whatnot, something that sadly also happened is we don't have that much of a notion about how damaging it can be to actually have such a need for being there so much for everything else. More so in terms of this idea of the human being as the social creature. I think that we have slowly committed an error, a mistake, when we have considered ourselves only as utterly social animals and whatnot. I don't think that we are all that socially, or let's say, biologically obligated to be social. Unavoidably, just like any other animal, we still require, I guess, some more basic parts of what comes with socialization that are the outcomes of socialization in the end, the continuous extension of the species throughout anything that might happen due to reproduction, and to some other degree you have stuff like, and if we do not understand enough in itself how to socialize, we are only going to come back to stuff like more wars and conflicts and whatnot, because we stop understanding that we can understand ourselves quite a lot. We are capable of talking about a lot of stuff, much more than what we actually realized before. Distance? What? Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the point. Calm down, calm down. Sorry. Welcome, boy. I hope you're well. Um, but the point. That's where I'm trying to go. The promise is, no, no, you have read philosophers, you know how they talk, you know that you propose everything that is normalized. Then you say, okay, this thing is what you shouldn't do. The normalization is you have the necessity to be so social, the necessity to be so connected to everything, to be so much a part of everything else. My proposition is actually it isn't all that useful. I think distance is quite a lot better. I think personally, not being so. I let me say it from this perspective. I think what happens is sadly we have created good enough tools in the modern world or uh, in the contemporaneous world to have discussions and different instances of manipulation. The proper term is manipulation, man. Of making anything that is related to socialization itself seem or look like the utmost necessary aspect of the life of anybody. In reality, this distance and the being distance from others is not so much of a destructive thing. I guess the always, yeah, the always easiest principle is, in a way, what we get to have is the first part. Can I actually be with myself? Can I have that capacity of sitting with myself? Um, I can try to, in some case, enjoy having my own presence and just that. Sometimes I cannot even recognize that, and I cannot even sit with my own thoughts. I find myself incredibly discomforted by anything of that sort. I wouldn't say exactly that. Also, society is just something petty, but yeah, in some way, it's not the best thing. Let's say it like that. There are way too many promises for some reason that somehow, I guess, the contemporaneous world once again doesn't teach anybody to doubt. So sadly, we need to spend like our entire beginning of our life learning to detach ourselves from those initial ideas of, oh yeah, yeah, we need to be so much a part of everything else. No, no, not actually. It's not so much of a necessity to be always a participant on everything. It's there are many erroneous thoughts in many different places unavoidably, and in that same sense, in the way in which society portrays the necessity for interconnectedness, and I guess in a way, that's the complicated aspect. In some manner, we have this discussion about, oh yeah, um, being alone versus being lonely. It is not the same thing. And in some way, we are not truly capable of discussing stuff of that sort. Because nowadays we have mixed them up so much that, well, you might try to be by yourself. You might find yourself suffering from loneliness in some ways. It's somehow something that has become much more of a myth than what it actually needs to be, I guess. I I remember, for example, this idea of it's quite nice to have the possibility of sitting with somebody else, both doing their own thing. You know, this idea of I enjoy the presence of somebody else whilst I continue my own life. I know I have the safety because the other person is there in a symbolic way, but I do not require the physical presence of them, the, I guess, mental awareness of their existence being next to me, always interfering with what I do. In some way, we can slowly, I guess, develop different methods of recognizing this initial idea of, yeah, we have the possibility of not suffering so much because the norm is, you know what, be be a social animal or young child. It's not so much of a necessity actually, but at the same time it's also not about, oh yeah, you know what, this is about distancing ourselves. Time to fucking go into a cavern and become a monk. No. Find, I guess, find a balance. As always, find a balance on stuff. It's I guess, let me say it like this. I'm talking about a hypothetical. I'm not talking about anything or anyone in particular. I am just talking about a hypothetical. But this hypothetical person that enjoys so much this idea of, you know what? Today I will open up a, what is it? A social platform and utilize the next 5 hours of my day getting angry. Then at the end of my day, I will get angry at me having just done that and repeat that ad infinitum until I die. That person can minimally benefit a little bit from, oh yeah, you know what? There is this. At least I haven't really even proposed how to get to a more appropriate method of detachment, even if the term itself isn't exactly non participation, it is along the lines of just being less in the more normalized places. Yeah, it's quite possible for us to enjoy not what the whole rest defines as good sometimes. It's good to learn to like things because we have come to realize why we like them instead of just depending on that general notion or presumed notion as to why certain things supposedly are good. We don't even sometimes have a proper assessment of why things are in any way good. We just know that, oh yeah, the world says that they are good. In some cases, it even is better, I guess, as a consequence of what I'm talking about. If you're gonna slowly allow yourself to distance the way in which you live from what the norm establishes, at some point, I guess, one of the many consequences is, yeah, also we have the benefit of slowly getting to realize that, yeah, wonderful enough, we can also see, we can also realize, we can also integrate stuff of different sorts that allows us to actually say what we like, what might be good, because we have understood our own taste, and at least we can do that. At least we can have that part functioning in ourselves. And yeah, in this case, I guess, once again, going back, trying to trace everything that I have said so far. distance is something useful. This distance is something beneficial. The issue, once again, still is that we, for some reason, are extremely polar creatures in the way in which we represent the stuff. It is not so possible to live or to picture somebody living within society, not so much being a participant of it. It is either somebody who entirely lives in society and spends their whole life for the sake of it, or somebody who lives entirely self motivated and with only those selfish interests. It's I am trying slowly to go towards that tiered way, but at the same time, uh, the thinking apparatus that we are referring to still possesses that issue of, yeah, you know what, I cannot think out stuff so easily without the referring myself to just extremes. So yeah, it's just a little bit of that. It's just a little bit. I guess unavoidably there are good times to enjoy life. There are good times to not be distant from everything. Now, let's say like this. If the conclusion of having distanced yourself is that you find your own existence being tormented by the thoughts that you have, by the things that you have realized, by the notions that you have to struggle with and whatnot, most certainly that wasn't a good life, and the outcomes that you are now dealing with weren't all that useful. Unless you're capable of, despite all of that suffering, slowly changing things for the better in order to not only disable those negative things from your own life, but also make it so that the, let's say, bigger scale of the whole society has no more to deal with any of those issues. Unless that happens, isolation in itself isn't all that beneficial. It isn't about, once again, isolation. This is not about, oh yeah, you know what, time to distance ourselves. Brothers and sisters, today what is it today? September, what is it, 23, 24? We distance ourselves from the rest of the world and we take upon the challenge of becoming monks of the 11th cigarette door. No, it's it's about just, yes, sometimes it's possible. Sadly, we have way too many myths that we cannot easily identify as myths because one of the many creations of this world is that we somehow don't have a myth ordering our life is still around. But sadly, yeah, it is quite a myth, an urban myth of sorts that, yeah, we are obliged to live so much in societies. We unavoidably, we have many things that we wouldn't be capable of doing ourselves, but there are many other areas in which a person is more than sufficient for. We can actually do much more than what we actually think we can. I don't know, man. I just, I think it's quite sad even to lack the capacity to at all address those things in any other way. But I don't know. Let me drink some water. Let me see. It's also, yeah, it's something somewhat complicated. So I don't know. I guess, I mean, okay, let me say like this. I have slowly also tried to understand it myself. It's it's a principle that isn't so much called a principle in itself because it's complicated to accept that we need to not be so integrated within the rest of the world. Somehow, let me say like this, there is this mode of conceptualizing the current world in which it seems so much like a necessity for us to be wholly integrated within society. So it's quite shocking to state that, yeah, it also is possible to live a life with some distance from the rest of the world. And even more, this whole proposition of it might be possible to live a, an even better life as long as we can slowly follow things that we come through our own personal understanding to realize, to see as good. But in itself, yeah, it's only through practice that the person can then confront the reality of, yeah, you know what, sometimes I'm suffering because I'm doing stuff that I don't even enjoy, that I just cared were useful, were interesting, were practical in any way, or something along those lines. I am not actually having a nice time or having a nice life. I'm just following around what the rest has defined. This let me say like this. There is this philosophical idea of the otherness. There is the self and the otherness. And something very funny that happens is this conceptualization gets very utilized and becomes something weaponized because you know what? One day I have lived my life until I was 50 years old. One day I wake up and I realize I have so many things that I don't actually enjoy having in my own life. And where did those things come from? Maybe they didn't come from myself. Maybe they came from this otherness that dictated on my own life what was important. And I don't actually like that idea so much. I understand the usefulness of at least having something to blame, but I don't think it's about so much, oh yeah, you know what, let's today gather all around and disparage at society because it, oh, God forbid society for trying to say what might be good for its citizens without having them destroy themselves so much in the process of discovering such things. Unavoidably, let's say like this even, it's far more risky to distance yourself from the rest of the world. It's far more dangerous to try to define by yourself what do you actually like. More so, there is this whole idea of the confrontation with the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes you might even realize that you like things that are not as good, sadly, and you have to either be capable of removing that from yourself or just hiding it away unavoidably, or third option that we trust isn't going to happen, the impossible mental breakdown because you realize that you are different from what you actually conceive yourself to be. It's if you never distance from the herd, let's say, that's not something that will so easily happen. If the whole of society defines what we like, says what is good, what is bad, and what's not, the person doesn't have to struggle so much with that. But at the same time, I don't know, personally speaking, sadly, what I see, what I find out is in many of those instances in which I hear somebody saying, "Oh yeah, you know what, I am suffering so much." I think I have seen. Let me put it in this way: I have seen many people suffering. I think from out of those made up statistic, maybe 90% of those, being generous, 90% of those weren't individuated, distantiated from the rest of the world, and only a 10% or so of them slowly took upon the challenge of isolating, slowly, maybe, yeah, in some cases, as I said before, you can take it to the extreme and fucking say, you know what, I am going to live in the middle of nowhere just to not have to deal with society. No, it's not about that. It's not about that. It's there is this idea of, oh yeah, I enjoy I don't need you to leave. I'm not saying leave. I'm saying be around. Be around the corner. Be somewhere. It's fine for you to be. It's not a necessity that you need to actually be here right now. That's not the point. But at the same time, it isn't. Oh yeah, distance yourself, disappear. No, don't don't exaggerate so much. I guess something about slowly becoming an adult is slowly learning that not everything is black and white. Same thing here. Distance doesn't mean that you disappear. Distance just means a little bit more of time for self, for their self, I guess. And I guess, yeah, but unavoidably, that's slowly something that has to become more nuanced. It isn't just, oh, yeah, you know what? Today it is about me having time to just pleasure myself, and tomorrow it's about pleasuring myself, and the day after tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, and once again ad infinite. No, that's also quite meaningless. It's about slowly, in my case, at least how I approach dating this stuff, understanding things, trying to at least allow myself to understand the stuff. I guess one day it can change back to today. I will make the rest of the world realize the stuff, but some it's an incredibly generous statement. Everything, almost everything. Let's say like that. Almost everything needs to be understood first and foremost by myself before it has any effect on everyone else. So yeah, I don't know how much of a useful thing it is to spend my whole life calculating out things that I don't understand or trying to change things which I don't believe in any way. Something here. It's not so useful to try to change the world if you haven't even understood why you're doing it. I guess it loops back to struggles and whatnot, meaningless struggles, or struggles that are just struggles for the sake of it are also somewhat meaningless. But yeah, I don't know. Let me take another sip, I guess. I once again I know it's complicated. I do have to just think out what am I missing. I mean, I don't know. It's something so funny. I think it's in many ways it's something that has way too many things to analyze in a certain or up to a certain degree. Mostly because sadly what happens is in the modern world, most of our life is associated with the rest of the world also. We're almost never by ourselves. So it's quite complicated to try and say, okay, yeah, distance yourself from stuff. In which way? How do I do that? How can I actually get to distance myself? In which areas is it correct to do so? How much? Also, once again, if the requirement, if what I am stating is I should distance myself, but not so much as to disappear, but at the same time, not so much as to not change, how much is enough? How much do I have to do before I feel like I am doing a good enough job? I think it goes along the lines of slowly, let's say like this, at this point in time, I assume, or I guess I can exemplify after all, it's it's something so normal, so it isn't really all that complicated. It's just listing stuff, but it's the ways in which we enjoy most entertainment is through the group, the ways in which we enjoy nowadays even learning is through the group. We don't engage that much more in solitary studying. We're also in these modern ways of having groups of people learning in classrooms, for example, the ways in which we treat the different medical conditions and the situations in those big spaces that are also done so in groups and what's not. Most of the systems of the present day work with the social communities in mind, to slowly become aware of how many of those do exist and how many of those do impact ourselves is the beginning. Let's say it like that. Like that. It's the beginning. And after that, yeah, then it comes the possibility of, if I have to choose one, at least going for the one that I can see will hurt me less, or try out. Try out. I wouldn't even assume. I wouldn't do so just based on the utmost certainty that there is not going to come anything bad out of what I do. I wouldn't expect things to just be as perfect as always. The the perfect plan doesn't exist. Therefore, trying to hope for the best outcome possible will only result in disappointments. So yeah, try at the very least see which one of them might have the least negative consequences if I slowly distance myself from it. Sometimes, I don't know, for example, I don't need to waste my whole life learning at the same pace that everyone does. Therefore, I can slowly do so by my own terms, through my own methods, by ways by which I myself get what is going on, get to stuff, understand things. That's a much better proposition than nothing else. And yeah, that's I guess a good sort of non-answer. Once again, I cannot really say which one of the many things is the best to distance one's ourselves from, but mostly I guess the excuse is because yeah, it applies incredibly to the particulars. Some people can be incredibly absorbed by their work environment. Some people can be incredibly absorbed by their scholar environment, by their social groups and their social circles. It depends way much more on who we are, where we find ourselves living, what are we doing. So yeah, it's not as always one size fits all or something like that. It's observation as always. First step is realizing what I might do to change this situation in my own case, then slowly acting towards the realization of those things so that it gets better, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. Let me. I don't have any more water. Let me drink the final bit of it and try to think if I am forgetting anything else. No, yeah, okay. I actually don't. So that will be it for the second idea, I guess. Thank you very much. Uh, Now, uh, hard times have come because I actually don't even know what should be the deal idea. Um, as always, no, there are like way too many possible, already sort of mentioned ideas. I don't really think it's all that useful. To some degree, I get the point of just going by what is tangentially related, but at the same time, I'm like that. I think it's quite boring just to spend one entire day talking about just the same thing from five different perspectives, or I don't know. Instead of talking about Italian bread. Now we're going to be talking about French bread. Wow, incredible. No, yeah, that's quite pointless. So let me think about something else. And nothing better for that than and here comes the wonderful excuse. I just said it. I actually went. I don't have any more water. Let me get some water and probably I don't know something, not something to eat, just a fucking candy. And yeah, after that we're going to be back to something DM. Uh, I don't even know what, but yeah, thank you. Uh, yeah, that's my promise. Give me like 5 minutes. Not that much. Should I actually restart the timer? I'm not going to take 5 minutes. It's just going to be like 2, 3 at best if I fall and break my ankle or something. So yeah, give me a second. So I spent like minutes trying to click the unmute button on the mouse after I realized that yeah, indeed I can't because it's disconnected. Anyways, can you actually transition through this? Through. Okay. Good evening. Good evening, Barak. I realized something. I finally I don't even know where the fuck did that came from, but I had an idea. I should actually change the fuck idea and do that. I have. Let me change this title. It's just like 5 seconds. Let me mute. This is wow. Good evening. Excel session flow. That's that's the idea. I don't even know exactly how did I come to that realization. Where the fuck did that come from? I don't know. Stuff. I guess one of the many wonderful things of existing that you just have enough ideas in your mind one day that you realize, wow, I don't even know where the fuck this idea came from. I should actually revise where that notion appeared from. Why do I say things like this one? But anyways, that's a different analysis, not what we are concerned with right now. The point is, I was actually thinking about this in terms of, yeah, something very funny that I have been thinking about is this correlation between the idea of exercise and flow, as in flow state. Not exactly. I guess I should add that. I don't know. I don't know exactly. I will assume some people can understand. If you have read anything about that, you probably can make the assumption that, yeah, it isn't about the other sort of flow, but rather the flow state, which can be influenced and triggered by doing stuff like exercising and such. And I was thinking about it in the sense of, I think it's useful. Unavoidably, in a more general sense, there is this story of, oh yeah, you know what? It's necessary for us to exercise. It's useful for us to keep ourselves healthy and to do things so that we don't rot away and sort of crumble down with the passage of time and rot. Oops, I already said that. And find ourselves decayed because existence is something that always consumes us and whatnot. No, exercise is good, but at the same time, there is something that we have quite a difficult time saying, that directly saying, that is, that there is also this idea of what can happen with exercise is that you can trigger those instances of flow state, or so-called flow state. What the fuck is a flow state even? So that we're all on the same page. Flow state equals mindfulness, which equals also just the moment in which you can, to some degree, feel your brain functioning in a different way. I, neuroscience has a whole explanation for that. It's overtly complicated. I understand it, but I don't think it's all that useful. It's just basically, in the average, the person is accustomed to functioning in one particular way, in which the brain treats the different ideas in a more basic, rudimentary manner, in which it just goes from the most basic thing to the most complicated one, trying to find issues and nothing else. Everything else that the conscious mind does is not so aligned with what the unconscious mind actually is working on. And in most of that, yeah, in most of those basic times or normal enough encounters, the mind is always being ruled by what the unconscious is capable of doing. And the goal, that's the problem. It is the goal, but we don't even talk about that as the proper goal. We don't even understand why it is so necessary to have stuff like being in the flow state. We have different articulations about the same idea from different perspectives and whatnot, and how useful it is to find yourself in the flow state and to practice mindfulness and blah blah blah. But we cannot still directly say, and yeah, you should actually try to include as much of that as you can in your own existence. We, we still haven't articulated that whole idea properly enough. But what we do have is, to some degree, we know that this thing exists in its more bare-bone form. We have modes of understanding that, yeah, in itself, being capable of accessing this different method of thinking in which your brain, it, it, and that's the complicated part, it isn't just something more mythical or more mythological in definition. It's actually about the ways in which the mental capacities and faculties themselves operate by accessing stuff along the lines of flow state, so the so-called flow state, what we can do is actually operate with the consciousness in a wider array of areas and in a more direct manner than what the conscious is capable of doing. So, why is this related at all with exercise? That's what I was thinking about. Because subtly, we understand that it can be triggered, but we do not understand the middle part, the middle connection between those two things. Something also wonderful that happens is you can actually train yourself. You understand, as long as you're capable of doing some sort of exercise regularly enough, you will slowly see that it is not so complicated for you to just slip onto this method of literally just flowing onto the actions that you are trying to go for, doing the stuff that you care to do and whatnot. It's not so complicated, but it is still missing in all of that equation. That also, what can be furthermore practice is the whole aspect of, and you know what? Funnily enough, you keep on practicing, and one day you can realize that it is not something that just happens outside of your control. The modes in which we find ourselves slowly getting into that is also associated with many other processes. Exercise in itself, the, the, the gateway that exercise brings onto what is the flow state, what is mindfulness, what is called, I think, active engagement in the neurological field or something like that. What is called by many names, which is still in essence the same idea, is not so much of an impossible to actually modify thing. And it's not so much something of an utterly mythological, once again, mythological construction so that it's inaccessible. Once the bridge is created in the mind of, okay, by doing exercise, I can slowly realize that I can slip onto this different mode of operation, let's say, more. Another subsequent realization that I get, we don't, yeah, I get why we don't get to have so much, and that is because we don't even think out those things in the regular. But by getting accustomed to doing such a thing, by getting accustomed to feeling that, then we can further develop ourselves onto those different modes of operation that allow, in our particular cases, to identify how to even more easily activate these things, activate what allows ourselves to once again feel into the flow state. I guess I'm pretty sure a different mode of defining that is bullet time, even. How to find ourselves being in that sort of bullet time is not so much of a complicated thing. Once it becomes a realization in itself that yeah, we can actually have a lot of control over that. Sadly, as I guess I said it in relation to a different sort of thing with distance and whatnot. Yeah, the myths that we have created around those things make it look like it's always something overly complicated. Sadly, it isn't so. And unluckily, it's not something that only a very special group of people gets to access and no one else. You either have it or you don't. It's another subset of skills. And as with any other skill, it's something that is practiced with enough repetition. And suddenly, yeah, I guess the issue becomes okay, then how much time do I have to actually waste in doing that? How much time do I actually have to waste in occupying myself with practicing this incredibly tiresome activity. How much exercise do I have to do before I can easily sleep onto once again the flow state in just a handful of minutes? And that might be a far more exigent, exigent re- requirement? No, request than to just say, yeah, you know what? You either have it or you don't. And you seem to not be a person capable of easily finding yourself in that state. So wow, such unlucky, unlucky draw, brother. Time to have better lucks in the next try. But I don't know. I prefer personally, as always, I prefer that level of agency over things and to just know that it's oh yeah, you know what? You know what? We have discovered this wonderful idea that is the bullet time. But 1 in 5 million people can access it and no one else. Not so much actually. The reality is that yeah, I guess anybody that reads about that enough finds it to be the sort of unmentioned conclusion that yeah, it seems to be the case that we are actually trying to develop as many methods of accessing this mode of thinking with as many plausible ways as we can, so that we can then, after having all of those doors open, finally reach the conclusion of, and you know what, this is something that actually everyone can practice doing. But we are, in the general sense, in the, I guess, social discourse, yeah, at the social discourse level, at the at what society understands for the flow state and whatnot, we are not there yet. It's not a common knowledge that yeah, everybody can actually find themselves there and can practice doing so. It is still somewhat of a mystical thing that only happens to a select handful of trained people. I remember, for example, even this definition of oh yeah, only a very highly trained, highly specialized group of soldiers who are fighting in wars were capable of going into the flow state. That I remember hearing like 10 years ago at this point. Nowadays, luckily enough, at the very least, it isn't so much of a myth. It is at least it's just average people who have trained themselves quite a lot. But the reality still is that even the most average person can probably do so and find themselves in that state with so much of a already predispositioned quality, intrinsic quality. I guess, yeah, in that sense, the future does hold quite a lot of wonderful things. Today's those days in the future in which we can actually say that, yeah, you know what? Everybody can actually find themselves in the flow state very easily. But so far, yeah, it is still the promise, the only realistic promise to make is you have to waste yourself or you have to invest quite a lot of time before you actually get to develop anything. Otherwise, it is still quite inaccessible, but I don't know, man. I, as I said before, at least that is better than the previous conception. But yeah, that's, I think the thing. I don't know. As personal perspective, I guess, I don't actually. I don't actually think about it that much. I just think it's, yeah, I understand the whole desire for flow state and whatnot, but at the same time, it's unavoidably, there are different sensations and whatnot. I have understood that much, and I do have methods of accessing it myself. Like, oh yeah, you know what? Once you get accustomed enough to doing sorts of exercises because you have to, like it's my case, you sort of stop worrying so much about, oh wow, am I going to get this or not? It's more along the lines of, oh wow, yeah, this is unavoidably going to happen as a bonus consequence of my of the rest of my existence. So once again, it's sort of complicated because I never actually tried to stop to think about it. It's quite wonderful to have the possibility of having stuff of that sort. I guess that's also why I would even go as far as to say more people should actually change their methods of transportation from incredibly damaging stuff that is any kind of publicly shared transportation as something more private that is self-propelled. I think it is the proper definition, because once again, in that case, that's my personal experience. I see that happening quite a lot, and I see that being the norm for most people. But yeah, that's also where you can also access all of this stuff. It's shouldn't be so much of a crazy debate or a crazy discussion. It's just that we are so comfortable nowadays. I still get it. I still look at the people sometimes who are up in their buses or in their taxis and whatnot, and it's understandable. Once you have to tire yourself out, it's fucking annoying. As I was saying, it's also why I get to have this perspective myself. I don't get to have the benefit of finding myself in a flow state because I am actually searching for that. It just happens as a consequence, as a collateral of out of other things that are motivated because of different reasons, and that's far more different than what I actually have. Far more better, I would even say. But yeah, yeah. Um, I guess, yeah, do exercise. And the best part also is, I think it hasn't really changed, or in terms of, no, quite the opposite. It is slowly changing quite a lot. But I'm pretty sure most exercises can, in some way, shape, or form, lead to in any kind of flow state. So I am not even saying, oh yeah, to do this kind of. I don't think it's all that useful to just focus on the particular method in this case. I think the consequence of finding yourself in that is far better to understand as just, once again, a collateral, as something that actually should be happening always, anyways. But yeah, that's it. I guess that's it. I don't have that much more to say now, for real. Um, yeah, yeah. I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that much. Thank you. It was a very nice day. So we we are done thus far. But yeah, yeah. As always. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sticking through this. It was a very complete discussion. As always, thanks for the time, for the patience, for everything. Have a nice rest of your day, night, evening, whatever. But yeah, um, until next time, and if not, it was still fucking wonderful, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, take the most important thing itself is actually take care, be happy, hydrate. I guess also do exercise. all this stuff. Be a responsible human being. Thank you. And yeah, thanks for everything. Goodbye.